Yeah, I'm sure.
Tony Caravan. You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
Yeah, it's not what you don't. Morning Mania. The title of this show today is An Endless Flow of Consciousness. Just want to make sure, we got the right thing up. Started off with clearing the throat. See if my coffee's still hot. I put the air conditioner on early, so I didn't have to be here with the still hot with the muscle shirt on. Some people I guess can't grasp the concept of just trying to be comfortable and that, this is my show and I should be able to do whatever I want to be comfortable for 2 hours. Game over. You don't know what you don't know. There's a couple new graphics on the thing. I don't know if you can see the... I don't get a real view, but I've got the Mystery Science Theater crew are guest starring today at the bottom of the screen. That'd be probably hard to make out. Stay in black and white. My chair is what my chair is. Uncomfortable. And since we've got a title graphic that is taken from one of my... it's art I created for a music video. Maybe we'll take the guitar out at some point and, and mess with the git fiddle. That'll be a...
Tape deck alert. Tape deck alert.
You betcha.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
Sure thing, buddy.
Hello.
If you got it, you might as well flaunt it. You might as well use it.
Presenting the world's greatest everything. Presenting the world's greatest everything. Presenting the world's greatest everything. 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 Everything.
I think all three of yous popped your stoppers.
You betcha. That's a fact.
I am your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man.
And yes, it's time once again for another Tony Caravan Live. This is show one. I think this is the 137th show of the year, if I'm correct. I'm going to try to do this without taking... Yesterday when I did this, I accidentally closed the browser. But I'm pretty sure, date and year of year. And so it's called the DOY calendar if you're looking for something like this. No, this is, it's August 25th, 2021, and this is the 237th day of the year. So in effect, it's the 237th show. I mean, I missed one show, but I've had a couple extras, so it's at least the 237th show. I mean, think about that. It's 5:40 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the former United States. And I guess we can talk about the weather here, just for the sake of it.
The Weather Watch forecast.
A little delayed reaction on that audio clip. It's saying it's 66 outside the studio here, which I'm hoping is reason why it hasn't instantaneously gotten very hot in this room. But there's no guarantee that's not going to occur within a matter of minutes. But it's going to get up to 90 degrees here today. 70 overnight, which basically, I always tell people this, but, never get the same viewers except for a handful of people. So if you're new at this, when it says low, usually it's when it's as dark as the night's going to get. It's my argument against the climate crisis crew the idea is that, when the sun, if you really want to understand that the planet derives its temperature and the climate is ruled by the sun, just remember that if it's 90 degrees outside, it's friggin' hot because then the sun's glaring down, giving you a sunburn or suntan, depending on how you've adapted to it. And at nighttime, it's going to stay, like when it's 90 in the daytime, it's going to be like 80 at night. It's going to be high 70s. And then and it's dark and gets cooler, but by the morning when the sun has been gone for, since say, what is it, setting at 8:30, 9, something like that right now. So when you have sunrise at 6 something, I guess they're saying sunrise 6:36 a.m. here, according to this. So at 6, a.m., which we're not there yet. Then you'll get the 70, the lowest point. But I mean, then the Earth is cooled because the sun is but the sun at that point has really literally only been away, for about 10 hours, right? So imagine, 9 to 5, actually 9 to 5 would be 8 hours. Yeah. Like not even 10 hours, like approximately 9 hours or so. And you're suddenly, if you've cooled from say 90 to 30 degrees cooling. And so now you understand. I mean, that's what I usually, anyway. So it's going to be 90 today, 70 at the low when it's as dark as the night's going to get. Thursday in my neck of the woods, which is kind of the mid-Atlantic states. Like I said, I'm an hour away from one of the entrances of the Northern Appalachian Trail. I always laugh about that because I think it's kind of funny. 88 tomorrow, which will be 90. 88 on Friday, which will be 90. 86 on Saturday, which will be 90 if the sun's if you're sitting in the sun like I do when you go back by my garden and my patio. South facing area, sitting there late morning, right before noonish, or at late, like around 3 or 4 afternoon if the sun is really just keeps beating down. Yeah, it'll hit 90. Sunday 84. And all those nights, it's going to be like 70 is the low, meaning it's like never really, going to get, it's going to be bad sleeping weather, put it that way. A lot of...
The Weather Watch forecast.
You might see some brownouts in areas where they just don't know how to manage their electricity properly. But of course, it's also the magnetic field that is also responsible for that sort of thing. You don't know what you don't know is a part of my head. And you can get that hoodie, like Game Over, that a daily model is wearing, or Everything You Know Is Wrong, which is on the other side of the screen. That side of the screen. Everything's reversed, what I look at. Or you can get the... You Don't Know What You Don't Know on a t-shirt, which I highly recommend. You go to TonyCaravanLive.com. That's that. So, all of that said...
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
This is insane. This is insane.
Yeah, it is insane. But right on cue. I got the guitar here. Let's see if it's in tune. Angel, Angel. I don't know. Just messing around, man. When will ya? Jimi Hendrix. Foxy Lady. I need a pick for that kind of stuff. I used to have all these nice, really light picks. I like light picks. I haven't even used a pick in a long time. You know? I haven't written... The last song I wrote was I think Virtual Cage last year. And I do most of that stuff on an electric guitar. And I just recently restringed and filed down the bridge of this thing to get it. I don't know if you can even hear it with this microphone because this is like directional. It's a directional mic. You're listening to the Tony Caravan Show. These chords are same ones used by a band from the 70s. They did a song that was called Out in the Country. Those open major seventh bar chords are really neat. Guitar's not in perfect tune. I should laugh, but I cry. I used to know how to play it. I used to know practically every song under the sun, you know? Because whenever a new song would come out, I would want to learn it, right? But I almost feel like I could get back into the songwriting mode. So maybe I'm due for a couple new tracks. You can't. Ask anybody, you don't sing at 5:50 in the morning. Lolly, lolly, lolly. Sometimes I feel like writing some songs in the morning time. It's weird the way it is. Sometimes the simplest chords you use, because of the atmosphere and the lack of distortion, all that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth stuff that's going through the air. Your head is clear for the natural vibrations of the universe. You can tell it's a little out of tune, but let's pretend I'm some kind of troubadour walking on the rocky road to kill Arnie. Stop and sit in a rock, big rock. I used to live in Big Rock, a place called Big Rock. Used to live in a big place called Big Rock. Almost drove my car over a cliff. That was a real scary time. You can't hear the nuances of it. It's a Fender guitar, but it's a lowest model. I don't know how long I had it. If I wouldn't have filed it down, it wouldn't have even been playable. And then I put these metal strings on it. And I really probably should have put thicker acoustic string to give it a more, like a deeper acoustic sound. The world is in a kind of state that none of us can explain. Things are getting weirder by the day. And as David Icke said, what's up is down. Everything is wrong. You don't know what to believe. And not even the song. Yeah. Oh, welcome to the show. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Everything you know is wrong. Everything you know is probably wrong. Angel. Don't know any Angies currently. Well, I had that guitar graphic on the morning graphics. So I felt compelled I better at least bring the guitar out. Maybe we'll bring it back and do some Elvis and Johnny Cash a little bit later in the show. No promises, but it's a distinct possibility. We got a long time. I didn't waste too much time with that stuff. You see, I'm using the morning show mug. I haven't gotten any notifications that anyone else has purchased one, which is sad. Sad to hear. Mr. A says he only plays guitar when he drinks, but I only drink about once a year. I don't drink. I haven't had a drink in about almost a month and a half, 2 months, actually. It's not like I used to drink all the time. I was like a daily drinker. After work, I'd do the happy hours thing, or at least then it was like once a week or so. Then it kind of moved to once every 2 weeks, or if somebody visited. I have this bar. And a couple of months ago, I was thinking, well, I got the bar. Maybe I'll just have a couple of beers. Because when you get away from doing something, it's not like the amount of alcohol you need, to get the desired result, whatever, is less and less. So if you haven't drank, when you don't drink, and if you take a couple months off drinking, a couple of beers and are enough. And if you're drinking at a slower pace, But I was getting into drinking a little more frequently, and I was listening to music and hanging out at my bar. It was kind of nice and stuff like that. And then I had a couple, just bouts with some of this, these medical things, which really I don't, to be honest with you, and hopefully, and like I always say, knock on wood, are not that serious. But I just didn't get back to it. It's like I said on one of the other shows, it's like I used to smoke cigarettes a long time ago, like a real long time ago. Gave that up. But it's like once you get away from something, if you stay away too long, it depends on your personality. I mean, some people, like, they call themselves, addicts or something like that. And I personally, that doesn't make sense to me. I think I think addicts are basically allergic to the substance, whatever they think they're addicted to. They're allergic to it or somehow. Or they got some, I don't know. Because with me, anyway, it's always worked the complete opposite. It's like when I quit smoking, I tried smoking once afterwards, and I had no interest in it. And I said this on a couple of shows back. I don't know if you were around for that one, but I said, I kind of I like to have a couple of beers, every now and then. It's like part of my, my makeup, I guess, who I am. But I was like saying, hopefully I haven't stayed away so long that, like, if I was like you, if I didn't drink in a year, I'd probably start drinking. Well, actually, there was a time where I think I almost hadn't drank for a year. It's because of where I was, the location. Because I always associated drinking with having a good time and stuff like that. And I was at an area where I didn't really know anybody. I'd moved. It was actually the Gulf Coast of Florida. I was down there for a while. And I didn't know anybody. So I ended up, what I did was I brewed some beer. That's the first time I made my own brew. And that takes fairly long time for it to, go through all its steps. It's actually a pain to do it. But the beer I ended up making when it was finally done was great. It was one of the best beers I had. And they were like 16 pints, basically, pint bottles. And so I guess that like opened up the door, and then I eventually, occasionally had a few drinks. But I was still smoking cigarettes then. But I was like, every morning was like if this would have been me 15 or even 20 years ago, I'd have been like, if you listen to my old shows from the 90s, I'd have been smoking and drinking a couple of cups of coffee. That was my morning ritual. Anyway, that's that, So guitar, the morning show. Craziness. Life is pretty crazy. I was watching this guy. I have to double check to make sure I don't make a mistake. New window. Two bottles of whiskey, 20 beer loads of weed. Yeah. That's pretty crazy, man. The people who do use the chat, it's buried in the back, so I have to go when I have to do something else to open up to see what was chatted. So I'm always behind on looking at the chat, unless it's by chance. What I'm looking for is YouTube. Because when I was looking at YouTube this morning, I don't watch the news anymore because I got rid of cable TV. I see myself that I'm live. And it's got the picture of me with the guitar. That's why I felt compelled to bring the guitar up. Looking for... I'm just scanning the other YouTube titles to see what's up there. And I don't see some of the stuff I saw this morning. There's an awful lot of stuff. I still haven't mastered this thing I use. And so I'm a little bit slow on the draw trying to find things out. Get rid of that title card. But anyway, yeah, well, like I predicted, it is getting hot in here, but I don't know. I'll just I'll plow through the old Hawaiian shirt on today. One of many. So anyway, this is just another Flow of Consciousness show. We'll start somewhere and see where we end up. We'll either end up playing Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley on the guitar, or have some kind of great eye-opener about something or other.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And I filled my coffee cup so far to the top that it's ready to spill. So. But the weirdest thing, before I get into anything, is that how could it be stinking hot in this room? You know what I mean? Like really hot. And your coffee gets cold. It makes no sense whatsoever. You know, that would be like having like a cold drink inside, and you're inside one of those meat locker places or something, and suddenly you go to drink it, and instead of it freezing up, it's like tasting warm or something. I mean, the complete opposite of all logic. But anyway, I got outside yesterday, got a little bit of sunshine. Got to the Dollar Tree store, which I needed a few things. A couple of preparatory things for the next time my roof leaks. Some dollar towels and another plastic container bin type of thing that the drips, the water could capture water to keep it from coming down another floor. Things you do in life and the things you deal with are insane. Really insane. I'm trying to remember. I had like a clear-cut idea of what I was going to talk about. You know, based on some of the stuff I was watching yesterday before I went to sleep. On YouTube, of course. So I was watching some different kinds of things. I was doing some... Every now and then you just like search around, try to go to the edges of YouTube land and find things that you hadn't seen before, that sort of stuff. And I saw this guy from Bright, I think is it Bright Insight? Not sure if that's it. I just a new window. Let's see if that's it. Bright Insight. If that's the guy. I'm pretty sure. Well, actually, no. That's a company. But YouTube. I'm just going to have to take this through YouTube. Bright Insight. It might be Bright Side. I don't know. Let's see. No, it's Bright Insight. It says, dude. He goes around to different parts of the world. I don't know if you heard of this guy, Forrester, who goes around. You know, the Egyptologist type of people. They go on these tours to Egypt, Peru. You know, all these lost civilization type of places. And, you know, and they find all this stuff. And he was saying that a lot of these places now are closed off, like they're not letting people go there. You know, it's like they let you look at it from a distance. And I know what the other thing that I was watching was, it was a guy who does this, does some forecasting and weather forecasting, but he really has a guy who looks at one guy who looks at earthquakes, and another guy who looks at was given like the 16-day forecast. But he was showing, there's been a lot of 7 point, 7.2, 7 point this earthquakes recently. And and they've been kind of clustered together. And, and then there for a while there, we've had a lot of volcanic activity. And, one thing that these climate crises, there's strange things going on the planet. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But like I said a couple of shows ago, you had these big floods, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, 100 years ago or more. And that was that show where I was had Abe Lincoln up without the beard, showing that here's a picture, here's a picture that was taken 160 years ago with a camera, because the camera's an old invention. And so you could find pictures of Abraham Lincoln. And pictures of these events that have happened in the past, because they were noteworthy enough that people brought out the camera for that, right? And then eventually motion pictures. And so it's not like people like me are making this stuff up, and that's why I call this show ROCKFLUX, because we're on this rock and it's in a constant state of flux. And a lot of people just don't accept that. Like, they can't come to grips with it. But it's the reality nonetheless. So yeah, we've had these crazy jet stream patterns, flooding, cold, snow. Colorado had some snow in the higher elevations in August. There's just crazy stuff going on all around the world. But crazy stuff happens, and I was watching like these people who try to support this climate crisis, and they were admitting that in the western part of Antarctica, that the melting of the glacier there is due, well, they were saying partially. Because they knew that if they didn't say partially, they wouldn't even have, their video would have gotten blocked. From thermal, geothermal underneath, right? That was the melting. But they said in addition to global warming, they had to throw that in. But the idea is that it doesn't matter. I don't care if they throw that other thing in just to, pacify the people out there, the crazies. The fact of the matter is, they're quoting scientific papers, and the same scientists that are pushing this climate crisis thing in a sense of a man-made, that they're also admitting that there's geothermal activity. And so the point is, then you can't say this is strictly man-made. In other words, it's like I was trying to say, they contradict themselves and they don't realize it. It's like someone when they say this is the worst flood in 30 years or the storm of the century. And the last time this happened was, 100 some years ago. And suddenly that, that goes right in one ear and out the other with the average person. But with a guy like me, it just lights up like a bulb and goes man, you just contradicted yourself. If this is a 30-year flood, or if this is the storm of the century, then, and you say it happened 100 years ago, well, that was before all this stuff. And if it's a storm of the century, as if this keeps repeating it, if this is like a 100-year occurrence or some kind, then you're literally supporting what most of us are saying on, who are looking at the real science, that climate is cyclical and it goes on grand cycles, right? It's still a tragedy when there's a loss of life in a flood or some kind of climate event. I mean, it doesn't downplay the intensity and that we've got some problems. We're seriously experiencing earth changes right now. But they're primarily due to a weakening magnetic field and a grand solar cycle, that happens, and that people can only see. In fact, most people these days are so like brainwashed that their whole life is like they can't see a life before this thing or for some others just the internet in general. Like they've somehow been so mind's been so like blended that they can't comprehend that there was life before the internet and before apps and before a smartphone. And I could tell you one thing is that life was just fine. I had the time of my life, before all this stuff. I embraced it when it happened, when it came along. I was a part of like one of the early adapters and the early pioneers of it. Certainly the internet and websites and broadcasting doing webcasting. That's why I call this a webcast, because that's what I called it 25 years ago when I was doing it. Why change the name now? So yeah, I'm into technology. I go with the flow. Whatever happens, you deal with the events of the day, the discoveries, whatever happens. You adapt. That's what humans are good at, adaptation. Some creatures can adapt and they go extinct. Right? Humans adapt. So, and we have that consciousness, so we could creativity and we figure things out. That's why people are so, they kind of do this disservice and to the people who lived before us, like the ancients and stuff. Like they assume they were like morons or something. They had the exact same brain as we do. So they were able to figure things out. And I was watching this, and I guess it was this Bright Insight guy. And, or maybe it was him, or maybe it wasn't. It might have been a different, no, something different. Because that guy, he's really open-minded. Check him out on YouTube. If you're interested in like these ancient sites and stuff like that, he goes along with this guy, Brian Forrester, on some of these expeditions he has. And he's got a lot of photos. And it's some interesting stuff. He's a character, but, that's good, So it's not a dry show. But I was watching something else where somebody was talking about another one of these matter-factual type of people that were talking in terms of things that happened in the past, but there were no records. They always like to say, but we don't know if they actually knew how to write or had a written language, because we haven't found. And I'm going, man, but they existed, 9,000 years ago or even 600 years ago. Well, things like paper and books, in places that are like jungles, that are places being overgrown or places that are just, being baked in the heat and stuff, are covered with water, ocean rose 400 feet or something like that, close to 10,600 to 12,000 years ago, something like that. I don't know, somewhere in that range. We're in this like approximate 12,000 year cycle. Some people think it's like 13,000 year cycle because it's tied into the 26,000 years of the precession of the equinoxes. which is really a weird thing if you think about it, because all these different cultures seem to have the same, like what some people call astrotheology. So in other words, the idea of, Gemini and Libra, Leo and stuff like that, or, different names for them, like they would call these twins, or the water bearer, Aquarius and all that stuff. We're like in the age, we're in the age of Aquarius now, supposedly. We've entered into the age of Aquarius. Like that old Fifth Dimension song. But it's like the flood myths, they call them, but they're not flood myths, they're flood stories, because they found archaeological evidence, because the ocean waters did rise some 400 feet. And all the coastal cities, because people, even right now, the highest populations are along the coastal cities. But these flood stories aren't myths, because they're found in like cultures the world over. They all have it, slightly different, maybe adapted to whatever, but they all said it happened. And so it happened. Yeah. Like I said once before on a show, I said, there's more ancient writings that are pushed off to the idea of being mythological, right? Than there are what we would call historical scientific documents. In fact, science is only centuries old, but we have these writings, right? And texts that we've uncovered. We found things that date back like 6,000 years or more. In the case of, in some instances, even further than that. But at least 6,000 years, you go back to the Sumerians. And there's all this stuff. And so in one case there, you look at these things, these clay tablets, or these things they've written down, and here's like a recipe for beer. I mean, they were, speaking of drinking, they were drinking beer back 6,000 years ago. In fact, and then you'll see these documents that are basically just matter-of-factual documents of transactions between people, you can't imagine how many of these various, tablet-type things that they have. And then there'll also be stories of these, what people would think of today as fantastic stories of people who came, who came from above, or whatever. And so when archaeologists, like mainstream archaeologists, look at this stuff, they'll like, okay, yeah, this is a this tablet is a transaction, a business transaction. This one is a recipe for how to brew beer. This is how they constructed. This is how they constructed this particular building. But this one about some people coming down from the sky. That's not real. That's a myth. I mean, that's literally what they do. It's like, okay, well, you get this pile of documents, right? And you cherry pick. You say, well, okay, we'll buy the transaction and we'll buy the recipe one. But this story about, the Anunnaki or whatever, that's just fake. But, why would the same people write it down and include it in the same serious, library of records? And that's how crazy it is. And it's the same thing as in these other areas. I mean, these guys were writing they used clay. They had these weird little wheels that they would, I don't know how they even did it. There must have been other parts to it that we don't even understand. Because what you did was they took a piece of some clay that like you would normally bake in a kiln, like a sculptor or somebody who does pottery. But of course, they probably just baked it in the sun out there in the desert. You know, like people who make these bricks, you know, these clay brick, you know, brick houses. I mean, you know, structures, you know. They just take this mud and mix in some straw and some other things. They figured this stuff out, you know, literally millennia ago. And then they put him into a certain shape, and then they just have him bake in the sun, and it's like a kiln, which is, you know, it turns it into like stone almost, hard as stone, and it's somewhat basically waterproof, and it's sturdy, and it could support a roof. That's how they build their houses. And so, but they had this thing where they would get, like, I guess, roll out, had this flat piece of something, clay of some kind, and they had a roller, like, and you would on this roller was like, if you understand the printing process, on a plate, when you have a printer's plate, because I'm from a printing background. In fact, I'm the son of a printer. So my printing background goes back like 120 years. Yeah, that's how long my family's been in the printing business that I know of. All right. Like 120 years. And so when offset, in the old days, it was just, you know, like the Gutenberg, you know, press. You had, you know, this type, wooden carved type, you know, whatever, and you put paper down, you inked it with some kind of thing, put paper on it, and then applied pressure. Like people see Ben Franklin turning a crank or something, you know, to apply pressure, and then you release it, and then you pull up, and that's like, here's one sheet of a newspaper. All right. That's the old way. That's the letter press kind of developed from that, though that became automated back in the late 1800s. And, you know, and into the early part of the century. And then offset came along, which was more of a photographic process, but that was where they had presses that had cylinders on them. You know, if I could get. And so the plate was flat. You wanted to produce a flat sheet of paper, but what you did was, in other words, if I want to print this flat sheet of paper, my plate would be wrapped around a cylinder, and as the sheet of paper comes through, this cylinder spins, and that image is transferred to the sheet of paper, and then I get another copy of this, and that's offset, which technically you're offsetting from the plate, the ink, the image from the plate to the paper, offset. And it was photographic. At that point, they'd later realize how to make photographic plates. And of course, what we use today is digital, which is just created, you know, a completely different process. It's similar. They still have rollers and transfer, you know, toner or something, except a dot matrix printer, which is like just puts it along the page. Well, anyway, the Sumerians were using like offset type of thing onto clay. But the question is, how did they make those cylinders? Because the cylinders were solid pieces. And so this is something somebody could keep in their pocket, you know, or easily store. And so that they could duplicate this thing again by just rolling it over a flat piece of clay. So imagine a rubber stamp, which is just flat. That would be similar to like the Gutenberg and letterpress, right? The flat, you know, a rubber stamp thing. That's how the Chinese had printing. You know, they were like, it was more rubber stamping images and stuff. But it was, you know, once Western civilization got their hands on it, and the Western mind, you know, got into all these, because, you know, a lot of creativity, you know, built Western civilization. Thinking, you know, people thinking things out in a different way. A better way to do it, right? Build a better mousetrap. But the Sumerians were doing that 6,000 years ago. I don't know how that. So whatever it's to me, what was fascinating wasn't the stuff, the stuff that survived, which is there's thousands and thousands of these tablets that they found with all sorts of documents from very mundane day-to-day activities to this fantastic stuff about these people from the sky who came and ruled for tens of thousands of years, and we're mining gold, everything from mining gold to enslaving people to like changing our DNA. I mean, weird stuff. But it's all mixed together. And so, it just, to me, that gives it a certain validity. Because, like I say, you don't cherry pick something. Right? So to get to this originally how I started this out, I'm just babbling. This is a flow of consciousness thing.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
So, so these serious sort of documentary type of people, they were talking about these Olmec. Have you ever heard of the Olmecs? They predate a lot of those Central South American cultures. And, they were showing that they created, I think they were the ones that created these big heads that are still down there and stuff like that. And all these remnants of civilizations gone by. And if I may be not correct on this one, but I'm kind of pretty sure. But they also had obelisks. And if it wasn't them, it was another one of these ancient cultures, like these obelisks, like you see in Egypt, the things that look like the Washington Monument. Like, did you ever wonder, why is the Washington Monument there? Why did they put an obelisk there? Anyway, these obelisks can be found all over the world. Once I talked about this, and I had a theory on it, and if you ever go back to that video, whichever it was, I don't have these things indexed. I wish I did, But, I don't have the time. This is, like I say, this is a 237th 2-hour video this year. I mean, roughly speaking. Think about that. I mean, even if it was 200, how many people have 200 videos, right? Some people don't even have a 200 video library. And I have a couple hundred videos besides that. So who knows? And all the other ones I did, leading up to this stuff. So, I mean, man, I'm probably way past 500 something things. So, to index them, because I'd have to go through them, would probably take, you'd be lucky if you could index one a day or two a day, It'd take me a couple of years, I'd need a team, I regret not doing that, but when you do a flow of consciousness, you never know where you're going to end up. That's the problem. But I've talked about these kinds of things before, and I've gotten more in depth. And the idea was that I had this theory. It's just something I came up with. And it was actually almost came up through a flow of consciousness, but it was based on some other ideas. Like, I don't know if I mentioned it in this book Codex, but I've got 9 books out, and it could be in one or the other ones, or one of my, I don't know. I've also got essays floating around out there. Was that, this recurring catastrophe, so to speak, that seems to happen, this cycle I was talking about, this great solar cycle, and whether you believe has to do with this precession of the equinoxes, it's the tilt of the earth, and all of these things that, are factors. Like, I don't know if I have, let me just pull something up for you. I think the other day I was looking for some images, and I may have brought this up. And if I didn't, I can find it really quick because it's a common image I talk about all the time. Or let's see, it's either Earth tilt or just hang in there a second. I'm just searching through my content documents, daily slides. Let's see, Earth junk, axial tilt. Well, we'll look at this for just a second for the sake of it. I don't know why that one's not even showing up, so forget that. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me. This is worth talking about. I mean, it's common sense. I've had it on my, used to have it on my old website all the time. And why it suddenly has disappeared, I have no idea. Miscellaneous artwork, Earth Tilt. Here it is. Sorry about that. I thought I had added it. I have a filter on here. That's why I couldn't see it before. All right. All right. So, you have the Earth tilting. All right. And that's how we have seasons. Right. And as you can see, this part, and then, it's the same with day and night. The sun obviously is hitting the side that's lit up, and then the far side is dark. And that tilt that affects, that's one of the cycles that we deal with. But beyond that cycle, okay, let me just go and I'll pull up another one for you real quick. The one I thought wasn't working, but I realized was working. Where was that one? Well, anyway, I might as well bring this up while I'm at it, too. This is what they believe, those who are into this Earth catastrophe theory, is that they believe that the sun novas, yeah, you can see those guys from Mystery Science Theater. In the center of this is the sun. And this thing that's on the outside is like the shell. And so what happens is the sun has a nova, but it's not what you would call a supernova. It's just a nova. It means the sun remains in the middle, but the shell comes and basically wreaks havoc on the Earth. And it's, and it's basically a near extinction event when this stuff happens. And so, and here's another example of this idea that a lot of people in this climate crisis thing don't deal with. So they just don't accept the fact the sun is a major influencer of our climate. And so this shows how the axial tilt, there's the Earth's imaginary axis, and how the sun, whatever the sun-facing side of the planet is. I mean, this is child's play stuff, but there are actually people at the UN, IPCC, and NASA and stuff that are trying to say that the sun has nothing to do with the Earth's climate. I mean, that's how absurd it is. The climate, this whole climate thing. And they're messing with stuff. Have you heard of this bunker fuel, like fuel oil? Look that up on Wikipedia. I mean, I can pull that up. I think I should. This show's all over the place. I realize that. But I'm going to do this because now I'm starting to remember what I wanted to deal with. Okay. So fuel, it's called fuel oil. See, people don't understand that. When you hear fuel oil, you're thinking, what the heck is that? Well, fuel oil, also known as heavy oil, marine fuel, or bunker oil, is a fraction obtained from petroleum distillation. It includes distillates. All right. And it generally, it's burned in a furnace or, and basically oil tankers, they call it bunker fuel. All right. But I'm going to take a screen capture here. This is used out in the ocean. All right. Bunker fuel. or bunker crude is typically any type of fuel used aboard vessels. Its name is derived from coal bunkers. All right. You know, the climate people like that Greta and these people at the UN IPC, they don't know anything about this. All right. Now, I'm hoping they haven't removed this. Man, because they cleaned this up, and this guy, okay, health impacts. I'm going to take a screen capture of this right now. All right. And I'm going to try to, my mouse is so slow. I was too slow to capture it, but I'm going to copy and paste this for you. Now, when people talk about, you know, all of this stuff that's happening, let me see, save. These fires, for example, and weird weather stuff. We got these ships out at sea, and they are basically putting all this bunker fuel into the ocean. Let me quit preview. This is a process here, but it'll only take a second. So I'm going to call this and put this under. There's Abe without the beard, by the way. News. What was news? That was Abe. Title card. Image of the day. We don't need to see this. So I'm going to replace the image of the day with this bunker fuel thing. All right. This is going to blow your mind. Okay? Really. Where the heck is it? Bunker fuel. Now this is just text, and I'll blow it up full screen so you can read it. This is out of Wikipedia. Oh, that's me moving myself. If you don't believe me, you can read this yourself. All right? You don't know what you don't know. But let me read this. Health impacts of bunker fuel. All right? And you can look from satellite images like over in the Pacific off the coast of the U.S. And you'll see these, you know how you have these trails, what people call chemtrails, but it's geoengineering. Well, they're doing this geoengineering stuff with these boats, these, you know. Okay, so listen to this health impacts. Because of the low quality of bunker fuel, when burnt, it's especially harmful to the health of humans, causing serious illnesses and deaths. All right? Now, prior to, you know, they're saying to this like 2020 sulfur cap, right, which isn't being adhered to or anything. Shipping industry air pollution caused about 400,000 premature deaths each year from lung cancer and cardiovascular disease, as well as 14 million childhood asthma cases each year. And as this one guy said, he goes, and they told us we were dying from smoking cigarettes. All right, so 14 million childhood asthma cases. And they're talking about they've like have some kind of thing cap on this sulfur cap that just last year they probably put into effect. What doesn't apply, you know, they grandfather these ships, right? And the military never pays attention to any of this stuff, of course, right? So even after the introduction of cleaner fuel rules in 2020, shipping air pollution is still estimated to account for 250,000 deaths each year and 6.4 million childhood asthma cases each year. Now that's assuming that doesn't include like military ships and countries like China and all these who and people that don't pay attention to this. All right? You know, so this is insane, man. And they don't even talk about this when they talk about climate change. Like, this is one of the most dangerous things. This has caused lung cancer, cardiovascular disease, as well as childhood asthma. And if you want to believe that these cleaner fuel rules actually are being adhered to, which just would have started in 2020, which means, this stuff's still up there. So even if that is true, which like I say, I don't believe that there's been that much of adherence. It probably only applies to new ships. And there's ships and tankers out there that are like as old as like the old 747 planes. Some of these planes have been up in the air for like 40 years, 30, 40 years or something. There's ships out there that have been, just on the seas for forever. And they're still using bunker fuel. It's fuel oil. It's basically like the dirtiest stuff you can imagine. So even if you take this idea of this cleaner, fuel rules, and assuming that these people really pay attention to it, because they don't. Who's regulating this, right? No one, right? So anywhere from 250,000 to 400 deaths each year, and basically lung cancer and cardiovascular diseases. And anywhere from 6 million to 14 million childhood asthma cases a year. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? This thing causes all kinds of, it leaves residue in the oceans and stuff. And there's this guy who studies this, like along these shipping lanes and things off the Pacific, and how this stuff is, may well be responsible for these fires and things like that that's happening in California. That, and of course PG&E, who's admitted already that, they haven't properly, they've got these power lines that are basically right, the trees are all over them because they haven't properly done their due diligence and kept them clean, and that's how a lot of these fires have started. They don't talk about the Santa Ana winds that have been happening since, as far as we know, forever. They don't talk about most of California being in a drought. I forgot to say, when I lived in California, remember I said this once in a show. It was a long time ago, though, or fairly long ago. But I'm just in a babble today, and it's getting real hot in here again. That song from the 70s, "It never rains in California, but girl, they warned ya," right? Why would a guy write a song like that, and why would it make like the top 40 in the 70s if it wasn't true? Well, it was true. And when I first moved to California out in the 80s, I was there for 1 year, like the first year, because I went to California, I think, 3 times. But the first time I went, I stayed for about a year or so. And I moved back east and, whatever. And during that first year I was there in California, it never rained. Not once. I used to have this little Dodge Colt I talked about. It was an old Mitsubishi engine. It was the same kind of engine they had in the kamikaze jets from Pearl Harbor. Dodge, bought them up, and they called it a Dodge, sold it as an American car, but it was really it was from the Japanese factory that made those, the kamikaze planes. It was a good engine. It just never stopped. You went nonstop across the country in that car. But the cars were just filled with so much soot. Car washing was a big deal out there because it never rained. But the funny thing was, nobody was talking about droughts or flood, or any of that stuff. Like, they had plenty of water because the mountains, in the northern areas, they had all this snow. And then that snow would melt, and then that would all come down, and it wasn't being diverted to these family, places where they produce like almonds to make almond milk, and then the classic, all the wine country and all that kind of stuff. All these things that have propped up because venture capitalists and, the billionaires have invested in all this stuff. And of course they've moved into these forested areas with their chateaus and their developments in places that used to just burn, but nobody paid much attention to it. It was just typical forest fires. But the point is, the LA basin, so to speak, I mean, LA is like it's a desert. They built that city and this is like desert land. And there's cycles there too. And they go, so like every 2 to 7, I forget what it is, there's so many years that droughts are natural over there. But this new generation of people on the news media and these like climate crisis fearmongers, they don't know that because I don't know. And some of them probably lived in LA or something. They must have, you would think. But like I say, I did it. I'm giving you firsthand knowledge. I lived in LA. I was there. And I remember one year it never rained for an entire year. And there was no talk of anything weird. There was plenty of water coming down from the north. That's where all the ski resorts up there, Tahoe and all those places. I mean, they get snow. They get snow right into June and stuff. And it always filled up, all these, reservoirs or just lakes or whatever the heck, wherever the water was coming for. And then they started diverting the water. And like, in fact, in just a year or two ago, this one guy was pointing this out, and he had these government statistics, things from government sites, from the actual like water people. Whatever, people who monitor the levels of the various dams, but they're not dams, the reservoirs. Sorry, I just couldn't think of the word. And they were showing that just a year or two ago, all these reservoirs were like, every single one was like at 118% or 120% or even 110% of capacity. In other words, all of these reservoirs were above their level, which meant they should have had like something like 6 years, because these things were structured and built in California because of this like 2 to 7 year drought cycle and things based on the Santa Ana winds. And, in other words, in the early days, the founders, the people that built the original cities and infrastructure, they were aware, they studied this. It's like architects when they build a building, right? A good architect. In other words, they look at they look at factors and things. They look at like if you're building on a hill, is there water runoff, right? If a person wants to have, where's their living room or whatever room is going to be? Is it going to be, do you want it south facing? If you have it south facing, it's going to get hot. That'll need to be insulated more. If you want a naturally cooler home, you might want it north facing. Different factors like that, when people thought things out, right? That's what architects, developers, people who do city planners, that's the kind of thing you do. It's like forest management. Okay. So they knew that, and they built and had X amount of reservoirs that took into consideration these these periods of drought, and then there would be this, rain, type of situation. And so a couple of years ago, there was enough in there that there's plenty of water to have withstood, got them through the next 6 years or so. And now they're saying they're drought, and they're showing these things and saying, oh, look at this reservoir. It's at the lowest it's ever been, or the lowest it's been, blah, blah, blah. It's like this guy's trying to explain, he goes, where'd the water go? And some people have even come up with the point where they were actually sending some of this water into the ocean, like into the San Francisco Bay and stuff. Or diverting it to these weird, these other places, like an almond farm or something like that, or weird things and stuff like that. But anything but giving it, having them function in the way they should function. And then they say, oh, this is the worst fire year ever, or the worst this, that, the other ever. But they don't give you any historical context. They have no concept of history. They don't know about this bunker fuel, which I started this whole talk about. You know? And like I say, I'm not going to say that cigarettes don't cause, cancer or something like that, okay? Because that would just be too ridiculous. But the point of the matter is, like, this guy has said it, and it was like kind of semi-joking, but, it makes you wonder. It's like, that's pollution, man. That's stuff people should be dealing with, and that's still going on. And that's still on Wikipedia. I'm surprised. I don't think that's going to be there that long. Because that's crazy, man. Well, Honest Abe. Yes, that was a picture taken 160 years ago by a camera. Tell you, if you have anybody who's like, doesn't understand. And like I showed you pictures of those floods in 1889 and like the Dust Bowl in the 30s, right? Where you had drought and hot heat, unbelievable heat and stuff like that. Way before, they were talking about, like, they have these graphs that show, like, as if in the last, 30, 40 years, they've like gone like this. The heat has gone up like this. And they're just lies. They're lies. They're lying. Right? It's like I told you before. It's like the tree falls in a forest, so nobody's there. There were storms in the Gulf when nobody was basically there. There still were storms. Tornado Alley was Tornado Alley. It always has been. There's just a hell of a lot more people living there. It's a real tragedy what happens there. But there was a hell of a lot more people living there. The Mississippi, like I said, hasn't flooded in like I don't know how many years, but it's on a cycle. So watch out for that one. We're probably overdue, or the Mississippi's going to flood, this year, next year, or in a year or two. And then people will be, oh, global warming, man-made global warming caused the Mississippi to flood. And it'd be like, in my lifetime, this, like I say, I'm talking firsthand. The Mississippi I know at least 2 times the Mississippi flooded and destroyed houses and people were killed and stuff like that. Twice. I've witnessed it in my lifetime. So the cycle can't be that long. So it's the Mississippi. And you watch what they'll say. Oh, look, it's like what happened in Germany. It's like, look, man, these floods happen. Like I said, a town where I used to have my ad agency, they had a flood in 77. All right? 77. They had a flood in 1889 and in 1936. It flooded there 3 times. So you can see it's on some kind of like ridiculous cycle. Right? Cyclical thing. 2,000 people died in that flood. I think it was the 77 flood. 2,000 people died. If it wasn't that one, it was one of the earlier floods. In 10 minutes. 2,000 people in 10 minutes. Okay? And they're trying to tell you these things. And it looked worse than the Chinese. It looked worse than the things in Greece and in Germany and other places where you're seeing these kinds of things. I mean, I had the picture up, but, I don't know where it is now. Watch that show. It's like 2 shows ago or something like that. I can't keep all these pictures like, in these link things. It's like it's a limited. It eats up my bandwidth and causes problems. If I have all these things like instantly accessible, right? That's why I'm always on these like staring blindly like this into the camera, and I'm searching for stuff because I have to like put them in folders and find which folder I put it in. I literally have like 1,000 some slides I've made of these things. But anyway, I was talking about this idea that we just don't have a grasp on history. Everyone thinks everything happened in their own lifetime or when they became aware or when the internet was invented or the smartphone. And nothing happened before that, and people weren't happy, didn't live, didn't have fun, and it wasn't cool. Well, I'm here to tell you it was pretty cool, and we had all kinds of neat things. We had these cool stereo receivers and big speakers, and it was fun, and people had all kinds of hot cars, right? You could fix your own car. You know, it was a good time. It was like, in fact, way better than this. And there were like diseases and stuff like that came along, and you got better. In 1957, I believe it was, there was a much hidden virus that no one really talks about that killed over 100-some thousand people. And most people don't even remember that, talk about it. Right? That we know of, and that was in like the U.S. or something like that, 100-some thousand people. I forget which one that was. That's one of those ones like semi-erased from history because it's like, and nobody was, doing the thing and any of this stuff or whatever. I asked my mother about it, and she says, she didn't even remember hearing anybody talking about anything like that back then. Right? It was just a thing. And, I guess if you weren't in the medical profession or something like that or weren't directly involved, you didn't even know. And, and it's like, you still go to the CDC site, and I don't know if I still have that. I know I had it there for a while. But, it's that causes of death thing that I bring up. It's almost too morbid to even bring up. So let's just look at our title card here for a while. But, every year people die of influenza and pneumonia and stuff. That's why they have flu shots every year. People get flu shots every year. So you don't know what you don't know. And there's all these people out there that just deny history, like as if history existed. Now, nothing happened before they were born or before they came to the so-called age of reason, which I find these people very unreasonable, so I don't know if they've reached the age of reason yet. Very strange. And that's the world we live in today. And it's not going to change. There's these hopeful people out there. There was another video I was watching where somebody was talking, and they were talking about, well, if you educate the children, you'll have, then eventually there would be this generation of educated children that would come up that would question all of this stuff. And then that would change. That's how things would change. Well, that's impossible to do when you have children raised by the nanny state, basically thrown into preschool, right after maternity leave, and then raise their entire lives in this indoctrination system. And then after they get out of that conditioning and programming, then they're thrown into the so-called world we live in, which is just propaganda, and you don't know what to believe. You don't know what you don't know, and everything you know is wrong. And it's like these people trying to talk about these ancient cultures that existed, and they say, well, we're not sure, they must have been able to communicate with one another, but no one really knows how, and they didn't leave any written records. Well, how do you know they didn't leave written records or have written records? That's how I got talking about Sumerians. The Sumerians just happened to use these weird clay, things, like these press cylinders. And so that clay survived. It's like when they found those Dead Sea Scrolls in those pots in some kind of cave in some kind of desert. And it was just like a coincidence, that the right conditions of the temperature, the desert, the dryness, whatever, the clay pots, whatever, kept it and somewhat preserved those scrolls that were like a couple thousand years old or close to that or something like that. And, you know, and even though they weren't totally preserved, I mean, you've seen pictures of that stuff. I mean, they pieced a lot of those things together with tweezers and a magnifying glass. So how do you know that these other cultures didn't have stuff, but it was just in an environment? It's like down in the jungles of South America and in Central America, Mexico, you know, in certain areas there, where all this civilization existed for thousands of years. Well, they have taken aerial shots of those jungle areas, and there are structures there that humans haven't still even gotten to because it's so overgrown. That's how overgrown it is. So there's like other pyramid structures there and other city type structures, but they're just overgrown. And you're expecting things to have survived. And I understand that. I have these like things. I believe they're grapevines. Okay. People have told me that's a grapevine. But this has grown halfway up my house. I've had to like go outside my window, chop them down. They're trying to grow over my second floor window, grow towards my neighbor's house, who's like a psycho hates anything green. It's grown all down my fence. It's overtaken everything in just this one year. And I'm telling you, if in 5 years, like if I would have moved away from this house and no one did anything or cared about it, those things would completely overcover. And this isn't like these vines you see, Ivy League, like ivy, you know, the Ivy League, this thing up the side of a wall, and it kind of adds this, you know, romantic look to the architecture of these old buildings and stuff. No. These are like big leaved, you know, crazy stuff. It's like the canopy so thick. All right. It's not only covering, you know, portions of the house and the side of my fence and stuff. It's overtaken it. You know, it's 6 feet tall and, you know, several feet thick and several feet wide. So left to its own, you know, having its way of growth, it would overtake my house and my entire yard in probably just a few years, 5 years max. You wouldn't know, you wouldn't know there was a house here. Right? And it would probably overtake the house next door. The entire yard you wouldn't even be able to get into. So that's 5 years. It's like that show used to have, like so many years after man. It used to be on the History Channel or Discovery Channel. So people have no idea, you know, about the past and stuff and nature and how this is a planet of trees and, you know, living world. And we just happen to be on this planet. And the CO2 is what this planet breathes. That's what the trees breathe. And the cycle of forest burning is their natural way of clearing the canopy so that new growth could come up, and why the forests are the way they are. It's not like the end of forests. It opens up the canopy, and then all those things that have dropped down, all those seedlings come up. And they grow fast. Like trees grow really, really fast. I've only lived here for 5 or 6 years. Okay? Like I say, I only tell you firsthand stories. And you can watch my garden. I have some garden videos that pan the backyard. So it's like, I'm not going to, you know, this stuff, you could find this on. Look for garden videos. And I don't know which one it is, but, you know, I've done a couple dozen of them over the past couple of years. I ate an apple. You know, right? Guy goes to the store, gets an apple. And I save the seeds. All right. And I put them on like a napkin or something like that. Damp napkin. And in my back porch, when I first got here, I knew I wanted to try growing some stuff. Wanted to have a garden. And so I got some plant, soil, usually it's like a seed starter soil is what you can use, but any kind of soil works. Seed starter, when they say seed starter, it just means it's got certain nutrients and stuff in there. It's better, it helps push the growth. But anyway, I don't even know if I used seed starter. I think I might have just used whatever. So I had some pots. I put that seed, a couple of apple seeds from this apple I ate. And planted other seeds like lettuce seeds and tomato seeds and different things and under a grow light in this closet area off this tiny little porch I have in the back. Right. And sure enough, in a couple of weeks, one of the seeds didn't take. I don't know how many of them I planted in these little growth, these cups type of things, that have like 6 containers if you've ever grown anything. And I think only 1 or 2 of the seeds took. Might have only just been 1. But it came up and I looked at that leaf. I left it there, grew, like let another week or 2 go by. And these 2 leaves that after the initial like seedling leaves kind of fall off when you grow something from a seed, the first leaves come up are just like some kind of seed. They're just seedling leaves that, absorb. It's time to get some photosynthesis going. And then those things either fall off or they just wither away eventually. And then the first couple leaves came up. This thing got to be just like a 2 inches tall or 3, a couple inches tall. And I looked at it and I go, those are apple leaves. And that's my apple seed. And so I took it out of that tiny little thing that I grew the seed in and put it into a slightly bigger pot, with some fresh soil. And kept it under the grow lights in my house. And then when spring came, I put it in the ground outside. This is 5-6 years ago, maybe like 5 years ago. And I think no more than 5 years ago. Well, right now that apple tree is 7 or 8 feet tall. And I have another one that I grew the following year that's next to it that is about 6 feet tall. It's not as hardy as that first one, but you want to have a couple apple trees because, for cross-pollination and all that kind of stuff. That's what they say, so to speak. I'm not an expert at this stuff. I'm just doing it. It's like these shows. I'm just going through this life, looking at things, discovering things, and sharing them with you as I discover them, right? Firsthand, though. I'm not trying to deceive or come up with like some kind of, I don't have an agenda, right? I'm not monetized. I don't make money on this stuff. I don't make any YouTube money. So anyway, that thing's like 10 feet tall, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's really gotten crazy because it's rained a lot lately. And on the other side of, I have a thin yard. It's like only 19, 20 feet wide, but it goes back about 100 some feet. All right. Way in the back is where I keep my garden, and I have a little miniature patio set up, and I built a tiny little greenhouse that's the size, looks like the TARDIS. Okay. That's what I call it. So like in the spring, like early spring, I can move stuff out there because it's like a solar keeps, if there's still going to be a frost, it won't freeze in there. And in the fall, I could do, push things, take some things out of the ground, put it in a big pot and keep them in there to produce like a pepper plant or something to produce until it gets too cold. Right. And then I have my lawn chair, my lawn chair, whatever you want to call it, lounge chair. And that's where I just, in a sunny day, I'll lay out there and get my vitamin D, right? Because you need that for your immunity. Well, anyway, then there was this maple tree. Sometimes you see these maple tree things in between. I don't know if you have to have a house or you have to have a yard somewhere. And somehow in between the fence, there was this little maple tree seedling growing. And so I dug it out from its roots and I put it on the other side. Like the apple tree's on one side of the yard. And then I have this like concrete pathway to the I have a garage way at the end of my property. It's a detached garage. It's like where I keep all my crap and do my workshop stuff kind of thing. And so on the other side of that path over here, say, I put I planted this maple tree. Well, that thing's like 8 or 10 feet tall now. You know? So that's like a natural tree, maples, like in Canada, So, what I'm trying to get at here, and then, of course, I showed you the plenty, my garden. I don't know if I still have the picture here. Yeah. I mean, this is like stuff. This is just like one day last week. I just pulled all those beans. Those beans in the bed, in the background. I had beans I had grown before, and that's like one bean of my own bean seed, right, that I had sitting around for a couple of years in the ground. Those garlics, I pulled out of the ground, and I've got more of them. They're not really big clove things there. But, sometimes I eat garlic. I put garlic in food. And sometimes you'll get like some garlic if you buy like a bunch of it. And one of them you'll see a little green thing coming out of. So rather than eat it, I'll take that and I'll put it in the ground. And you end up turns into, you get a whole clove of garlic. There's peppers on the top. Look at those tomatoes. I didn't alter the color of this. They're red tomatoes. I must have gotten, like I said in another video, like already close to 100 tomatoes out of my yard. So many beans you can't imagine. A friend of mine came down yesterday. I gave her like that many beans and tomatoes and stuff, just yesterday. And this is stuff that I've got saved, and I still got dozens. It's like crazy. So the idea is what people don't understand is the naturals. They don't understand the planet. It's CO2 that grew these things. Okay, those plants require CO2 and the sun, right, and the rain. Right. The forests, they breathe CO2 and exhale oxygen that we breathe. I mean, this is the cycle of life. This is the cycle of the planet. This is it. It's, in fact, I'll say it again. I've said it many times before. It's their world. This planet is more a world of forests and trees and plants. And the oceans than it is of humans. And they say, oh, man. Like I say, get in a plane. I used to fly. I logged 100,000 some air miles. When you're up in the sky, you don't see humans. In fact, when you're high enough up, you don't even see cities. Unless it's nighttime, you can see like the lights of the cities. Right? But you know what you do see? You see green. You see mountains. Right? Rolling hills everywhere. Except for like the farmlands when you get out to the north Midwest and, all those big farm areas carved out in circles and stuff. Right? But I mean, that's man-made, but that's just growth, right? That's not polluting. Okay, my chair's shrinking down again. And it's hotter than hell in here. So, all of these things, and I know this is just a babble, and I've gone on and on and on.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And I forgot to put my hot coffee in here, and I don't know if it's hot anymore. It's probably cold. Iced coffee. Better off to take just a drink of purified spring water. Keep yourself hydrated. I can't drink cold coffee like that. So, everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know. And, it's the same old story, same old, it seems. But, you know, I think every day there's a different light to it, and there's different people looking at it. And I find these new things like this bunker fuel, they call bunker fuel, these ships are still polluting out there, that are probably responsible for more cases of lung cancer than cigarettes. I mean, as absurd as that sounds. You know, the idea that they say 14 million cases, this is Wikipedia now, that, you know, is definitely part of the corporatocracy's propaganda. You know, they'll quote it. And they're talking about 14 million cases of childhood asthma caused by this stuff. And that it was just last year that they passed some kind of like rules on usage of this stuff, which, as we know, these people shipping these, they have no idea what's going on in the seas, right? And there's guys that study this stuff. Like I say, you go down the rabbit hole on YouTube and you find people, because everybody's got a camera, and a lot of people spend their entire days just digging out this kind of stuff. I didn't even know what bunker fuel. I never heard of that before. And then this guy said it, and he said you go to Wikipedia if you don't, to find out. So I went to Wikipedia and I looked at it, and there it was, and I did a screen capture, right? As well as commercial shipping, cruise ships also emit large amounts of air pollution, damaging people's health. The ships are of the single largest cruise company, Carnival Corporation, and PIC, whatever that means, emit 10 times more sulfur dioxide than all of Europe's cars combined. Okay, let's read that last part again. The single largest cruise company emits 10 times more sulfur dioxide than all of Europe's cars combined. And that's what this guy was trying to explain, that it's not these cancer causing, these, pollution, these major emitters of all this harmful stuff that's literally killing people. Like if you go to the CDC, the leading causes of death are basically cardiovascular and cancer. And that these things are killing millions, and have been for years, literally for decades. All right? It was just 2020 that they're trying to pass some kind of, saying some kind of, to regulate this stuff. But, if you ever look at these regulations, they always grandfather the old ships in. It's like they're not going to say, okay, that cruise ship that you spent, hundreds of millions of dollars building has to be immediately taken off the sea. Right? So when they say, so they want to convert all our cars, like this is just one cruise ship company, 10 times more than all the cars in Europe. All right, well then what about all these military ships and all these other ships and these container ships in the Pacific Ocean, all that stuff coming to us from China and all these other places? You think China's going to abide by any kind of rule and not use bunker fuel or fuel oil? You kidding me? These things crisscrossing the Pacific. Well, they're probably emitting 10 times the amount of CO2 and sulfur dioxide and all kinds of other oxides than all the cars in the U.S. Right? And they're causing lung cancer and asthma on the magnitude of tens of millions. Which basically means everything is wrong. So why would you, so you've got these cars with, all these filters, catalytic converters, or all this other stuff, all these pollution guards that they have on cars now and stuff. And the same with factories and HVAC systems with filtration devices and all this other kind of stuff, HEPA filters and all this kind of things we do. Like I say, all of our appliances and computers now are all, in the U.S. anyway, are Energy Star. So they're like highly efficient. They hardly use any electricity. That's why I have next to my book Codex, you can hardly see it, but under the transistor radio is one of those jackery solar chargeable, but you could charge it in your house or through your car, power packs that's basically powering this on-air light. And I sometimes turn some other things on with it, right? Like, let's see here. I get it. Oh. There. That thing. I accidentally turned my on-air light off. That device back there. Okay? That these devices like this computer and stuff, these are all Energy Star things, so they use minimal electricity. And so a tiny device like that can power, and charge your smartphones, laptops. I have this radio here that I used to bring out a lot in my show. This is, this thing, which has a solar panel on top of it and a light behind it. Look how bright that is. It's crazy. And this is the NOAA weather radio, WXN33 in Johnstown. A NOAA radio, weather radio, solar chargeable, flashlight. Ridiculously bright. And then it's got this goofy thing on here that's going to blow your mind. Let's see if I can get some kind of light on that. If you look closely, those are that's a small USB and a larger USB connector. So this thing, and it also has a weird crank on the back of it. It's hard to see that too. Maybe if that just blinds you out. But anyway, I'll take this out in the sun and I'll solar charge it with that thing on the top. So if I get the right angle, you can see it. See that thing like shining a little bit next to the antenna? It's a solar panel. You could emergency charge your smartphone with that. In the sun. And look how tiny it is. And it's a weather radio. And a regular AM/FM radio. And a flashlight. You know what I mean? And a reading light. And the point of the matter is we already have this, under control, we've been heading to this thing. And even like Elon Musk's Tesla, and stuff and cars. It's like, we've been on our track here to do all that stuff. But the problem is it's this geoengineering and these wackos that are pushing this fear mongering that are trying to sell you a lie. They're selling you a lie. There's nobody watching right now. So, I don't know, man. You don't know what you don't know, and everything you know is wrong. And if I haven't made that case, and today's show, it was just basically a babble in many, many instances, but I'm showing you direct evidence and proof of it. So, so here we are, so yeah, it's great if you don't smoke and stuff. But it's like to find out that more, these people are, for all these years, decades and decades, right? I mean, what was the thing? Because like I say, they just put this thing into effect, this sulfur cap. 400,000 premature deaths each year from lung cancer, cardiovascular disease, as well as 14 million childhood asthma cases each year. Okay? Now remember, take a decade. So in the last 10 years, 14 million times 10 is 140 million asthma cases. 400,000 premature lung cancer deaths and cardiovascular disease times 10 is 4 million. Since the year 2000, all right, you're talking about 8 million. Who knows? It could be as high as 10 million people. And as far as childhood asthma, the numbers would be astronomical. Would be like 250 million people, 250 million kids, around the world. From something that I'm openly admitting I had no idea existed like a week ago. I didn't know about. How would I know? I was not, I've done a lot of things, but I'm not a maritime, type of guy. That's not my thing. A long time ago, I was going to go into the Coast Guard, but then I got sidetracked into some different stuff. So I never became a, sea. I've been on ships, but I never became a seaman, so to speak. But yeah, bunker fuel oil. So just in 20 years, think of it, 250 million kids got asthma. 10, maybe 10 million people died of lung cancer. It definitely, if you go back to the 90s, it would be well over 10 million people or more. What are the cigarette statistics? And these other things? Everything is wrong, man. And who knows what else? And so what are they trying to, turn the sky white, dark in the sun and all this stuff? And then they don't pay any attention to that stuff I was talking about, as far as, not Abe Lincoln, but they don't pay attention to that. The idea that there was a camera 160 years ago took a picture of Abe Lincoln and also took a picture of these floods and these other fires and these climate events and different things that have been happening we know because of the camera for well over 160 years ago and before industrialized America, even before the smokestack industries really, didn't come into play until the late 1800s, turn of the last century. And there are people who you can find photographs. You got to search real hard, look in the Library of Congress and find these things. They bury this stuff. But the camera was around and motion pictures started to come along. So before man was putting anything up in any substantial volume, right? Before even the smokestack factory industries and stuff were really up to full steam, so to speak. People were taking pictures of floods, devastating floods, fires, storm destruction, right? Then you get into the 30s, the Dust Bowl era, hottest temperatures, that we've known. People say, this is the hottest year on record, or since 2000 and such. It's been. Why are you lying? Why are you lying? Why don't you bring out the slideshow of the Dust Bowl? Right? Why are you lying? This is the worst flood. Why are you lying? When we know there were floods that killed 2,000 people in the U.S. in 10 minutes. And that destroyed everything. Why are you lying when the Mississippi floods every so many, like twice, I think, in my lifetime, killing people and overtaking, both sides of the banks and ruining houses and stuff? Why are you lying? And like I was showing, and in the 70s, you were saying, we were having these nor'easters and these crazy cold things when you were saying that we were headed towards an ice age, the same fearmongers. Do you understand what's going on, man? And what about that 1957 virus that killed like 100-some-thousand people that nobody even wants to talk about, or like they kind of erased from history? This is the world we live in, and it's like really, it's starting to get to the point where, like I said, you almost have to be afraid. Because, they're messing with us. They're not just messing with our heads, which is obvious. and taking advantage of people who are functionally illiterate because of the indoctrination system through no fault of their own. I'm not talking about handicapped people. I'm talking about regular people who've been like lied to their entire life since infancy. So they know no better. And this is generational. So you have college professors who were lied to since they were children. So they were taught and basically got degrees in bad science. And they're out there. That would, like, if some professor's watching this, he'd be like, oh, his face would be red, ready like in a cartoon, steam coming out of his ears. It's like, I'm sorry, man. You've been lied to. Okay? They taught, because you read textbooks of things that were based on lies. So what you believe is matter of factual is simply not true. And now you're teaching it to another generation as if it's matter of factual. See, I think these people at the UN IPCC and NASA that put out these papers and different things like that, I don't think all of them are malicious, evil people. I think they honestly believe it. They really believe this shit. Right? Because they weren't brought up. They didn't have a teacher, right, that was, giving them this, opening their mind to think outside the box and let them look at and showed them photos of things. Told them about these floods, the Johnstown flood, Hurricane Agnes. Like I say, I grew up when I was a kid. At one point, the power was out because of that same thing that caused the Johnstown flood, and I lived on the other part of the state. Johnstown's on the western Pennsylvania, and I lived in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, the home of Yuengling Brewery. And the power was out for like a week or something, I remember. And we got through it. In fact, it was a very social time. I once talked about it. The neighbors came together. We used to hang out in the streets. People, there was like joint cookouts, by groups of neighbors and stuff, using, making burgers and hot dogs on grills and stuff. You didn't have any power. And people everybody bringing like the covered dish type of thing out to the street, and we were just like having like a street thing. And it was a respectable neighborhood. At one point, like I said, a doctor lived next door to me when I was very young. It wasn't like it was some, someone like has some vision of some weird, ghetto type of thing, block party, which there's nothing wrong with that either. But we got by. But this stuff really happened. So I was witness to it firsthand. I've witnessed blizzards. All right. I've witnessed nor'easters. I was down in the Gulf. I lived down in the Gulf for a little while, and the tropical storm came through. Right. I saw it. I watched the eye pass over, and then suddenly first the palm trees were like dipping one way, and then everything stopped and calmed down. Then suddenly the palm trees were going the other way. I've got video of it. I've traveled to California, like I said earlier. I was there for a solid year at one point, and it hadn't rained in a single year. And they even had a pop song, "It Never Rains in California." And now they're pretending, oh my God, it's the worst drought. Right? And like I said, there are photos. You could find them on the Library of Congress. I mean, go to what you would believe would be reputable sources. There are volumes and books written about all these things. Photos, Pulitzer Prize winning photos of the Midwestern, Dust Bowl and all of that stuff. Unbelievable heat and things. And forest fire. People saying, this is the worst forest fire in history. When nobody in America or Europe, knows, can go back even more than a couple hundred years about in Northern California or the Northwest. So how do you say in history? Right? I mean, Lewis and Clark went out to Nebraska in 1804 or something like that. But I mean, they sent out explorers and different people were going out, but these are like guys, explorers, groups of people in certain areas, trying to open up, find passages or something like that. But not people there was no constant state of someone living there through an entire year or 5 years even until much later on. I mean, that was Mexican territory, so you got to go ask the tribes, and see in the oral tradition, ask those people, bring them on. You don't see that often, do you? You don't see it at all, right? Well, they have oral traditions, these cultures passed down, so they should be on the nightly news. But no, we can't do that because that's, like as if that's not, they're not reputable. Well, they're more reputable than the people on TV. I basically trust a chief, than I would a reporter claiming that this is the worst thing, right? Anyway, this was kind of continuation of the flow of consciousness, but it kind of augments yesterday's video.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And I think if you take the last two videos, excuse me, together, good morning, you really come up with a pretty good, it should open your eyes to the reality of how we're being messed with, and you don't know what you don't know. And basically everything you know might be wrong. Everything you know is wrong. And it's probably game over because I don't see Build Back Better or Save America happening. Okay? I mean, we're way past that. When you talk about the tipping point, it has nothing to do with climate. Okay? That's not it. That's cyclical. Climate is cyclical, sun and magnetic field related, and that's the fact, Jack. The tipping point is politics. We live in a corporatocracy, man. It's over, all right? Deal with it. For the umpteenth time, of course, thanks for watching, but go to TonyCaravanLive.com, scroll down, get yourself a shirt. You don't know what you don't know. Everything you know is wrong. Game over. Available in hoodies, T-shirts, whatever you want. Get a ROCKFLUX.com sticker and put it on your car. Go to Great Solar Stuff and get one of those things that I hadn't showed you in the background. Energy. For crying out loud, support the site. I'm not monetized and nobody's bought anything. What's the problem?